The night I got arrested ended with 3 cracked ribs and a felony charge. 10 minutes earlier, I'd just been walking home from a house party with my best friend, Brandon Miller. I was pacing a few feet ahead of him, arguing with my mom on the phone, when Brandon said he wanted to stop at a Quick Mart gas station for a beer. I barely looked up, just waved him off, too busy trying to calm my mom down. A few minutes later, he caught up to me, slightly out of breath, and tossed me his jacket since I was shivering. I slipped it on without thinking. For blocks later, my life detonated. Police cruisers cut me off, tires screeching, red and blue lights strobing against the dark streets of Toledo, Ohio. Before I could even raise my hands, they slammed me face first onto the pavement. The impact knocked the air out of me. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, just heard shouting, "Get on the ground." "Where's the mask?" "He's got the cash." None of it made sense. At the station, they shoved grainy surveillance stills in front of me, footage of a masked guy in a jacket that looked exactly like the one I was wearing. Brandon's jacket. The same one he had just given me. My fingerprints weren't on the register, but the cops later claimed they found stolen bills stashed in my bedroom. I didn't know it then, but Brandon had planted them. I was 18. Freshly 18. Old enough to be charged as an adult, too young to survive the system. The cops had cracked my ribs during the arrest, my public defender barely looked up from his file, and the judge sneered that I needed to be made an example. 11 months in county lockup. When I finally got out, everything was gone. My mom's trust. My friends' respect. Any future that didn't have the word felon stamped across it. The only jobs I could land were day labor, warehouses, kitchens that paid cash under the table. Meanwhile, Brandon flourished. He was the golden boy of our old friend group, posting photos with the girl I used to have a crush on, working as a store supervisor, grinning at concerts and tailgates like someone untouched by consequence. I told myself I didn't care. That I was moving on. But one night, scrolling through Instagram, I froze. A photo of Brandon from the night of the party, clear as day, wearing the exact same jacket he'd handed me. Same patch on the sleeve. Same tear in the cuff. The timestamp matched the night and hour of the robbery. My stomach dropped so hard I nearly threw up. For the first time since I was locked up, I felt something dangerous, hope. The next week, I became obsessed. I tracked Brandon's old check-ins, dug through tagged photos from that night, even messaged people we hadn't spoken to in years. Then I remembered something, the ACE hardware store across from the gas station. I went in, spun some lie about doing a school project, and the owner casually handed me a dusty USB. Said his late dad was a hoarder, never deleted old footage. That night, my hand shook as I plugged it into my laptop. And there it was. The footage didn't show the robbery inside. But it showed 2 things that made my pulse roar in my ears: Brandon, my so-called best friend, walking into the gas station in that jacket right before the robbery, and me outside, pacing on the phone. Proof. I sent everything to my old public defender. She never responded. Desperate, I found a volunteer attorney through a local legal aid clinic. His name was Marcus Alvarez, and he was the first adult who didn't look at me like a criminal. He said maybe, just maybe, this could get my case reviewed. That's when Brandon found out. He cornered me one night outside the distribution warehouse where I worked. He grabbed my arm so tight I felt bone grind against bone and hissed in my ear. "Why are you digging this up? You already took the fall. Let it go. You think anyone's gonna believe you now? You're a felon. I'm a manager." What he didn't realize. My phone was recording the entire thing. That night, I posted a single photo, the jacket. The timestamp. No caption. Brandon panicked. He scrambled into alumni groups and local Facebook pages, crying victim, telling everyone I was stalking him, obsessed with him, trying to ruin his life. For a while, it worked. People believed him. Until I dropped the recording. His voice, sharp and venomous, spitting words he couldn't take back. That was the crack in the dam. And once I saw that crack, I knew I was going to break the whole thing wide open. What I didn't realize was how dangerous Brandon would get once the mask started slipping. Because what he did next made prison look merciful. When the recording leaked, everything changed. At first, Brandon doubled down. He jumped online, called me a liar, said I'd edited the audio. His friends from high school piled on, posting about how I'd always been jealous and unstable. For a week, my phone lit up with comments calling me a criminal, a psycho, a bitter loser who couldn't move on. I almost broke. Almost deleted everything, crawled back into silence. But then something I didn't expect happened. People I hadn't spoken to in years, old teachers, classmates, even one of my old bosses, started messaging me privately. They remembered things. Little things. Like how Brandon had a knack for being around when bad stuff went down, yet somehow always walked away clean. And then one night, I got a DM that made my blood freeze. It was a blurry photo of Brandon outside the warehouse where I worked. The caption read, "Why are you still alive?" I don't know who sent it. The account was fake, gone within hours. But I knew. I knew Brandon had either sent it himself or had someone do it for him. I showed Marcus the message the next morning. He stared at it for a long time before sighing. "This isn't just about clearing your record anymore," he said. "This guy's dangerous. We need to document everything. Every text, every call, every shadow." So I did. I started keeping a notebook, times, dates, screenshots, even weird cars parked near my apartment. My paranoia became ritual. Lock the doors twice. Check the blinds. Sleep with my phone recording in case he ever came in. A week later, Marcus called me, his voice sharp with excitement. "We got a hearing. Judge is reopening your case. We're gonna need you ready." For the first time in years, I felt like I was breathing real air. That's when Brandon showed up. I was walking home from work, cutting through the alley behind the warehouse, when a figure stepped out of the shadows. It was him. His face wasn't smug anymore, it was tight, pale, veins standing out on his neck. "You're gonna regret this," he hissed. "You think you're smart? You're nothing. You'll never win against me." He shoved me, hard, into the wall. My phone almost slipped out of my pocket, but I managed to hit record without him noticing. He leaned in close, his breath hot with beer, and said, "You already took the fall once. Next time, it won't just be jail. Next time, you'll disappear." That recording, it was the nail in his coffin. Marcus submitted it with the footage, the timestamps, the Instagram photo, everything. The day of the hearing, I walked into the courthouse with shaking hands, expecting to be laughed at again. Instead, I watched Brandon's face go pale as Marcus played the clips out loud, the audio echoing in the courtroom. His voice. His threats. His confession. The judge didn't slam the gavel right away. She leaned back, silent for a long moment, then finally said, "We'll need a full review. But this evidence, it changes things." I should have felt relief. But all I felt was fear. Because Brandon's mask had cracked in public now. And I knew what he was like when he got desperate. That night, I got home to find my apartment door open. Nothing stolen. Nothing broken. Just open, swaying slightly in the draft. Like someone had wanted me to know they'd been there. I changed the locks, installed cameras, slept with a baseball bat by my bed. And then, at 2 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You think this is over?" That was just round one. I stared at the glowing screen, heart pounding. I thought I'd already hit bottom. I had no idea how far Brandon was willing to drag me down with him. The morning after that text, I sat on the edge of my bed staring at my phone like it was a loaded gun. Every sound outside my window made me jump. Every creak of the floorboards felt like someone inside my apartment. I thought about calling the cops, but what would I even say? Hi, my ex-best friend framed me for armed robbery years ago and now he's breaking into my apartment just to rattle me. They'd laugh in my face. Again. So I did what Marcus told me to do: document, document, document. I wrote down the time the door was open. Took photos of the lock. Saved the text. Added it all to the growing file that was starting to look less like my life and more like a crime board from a true crime show. I thought I was the only one who'd been destroyed by him. I was wrong. One night, scrolling through Facebook, I got a message request from someone I didn't know. A girl named Hannah Lopez, from a town about an hour south of Toledo. Her first words made my blood run cold. I think Brandon did the same thing to my brother. We got on the phone, and her voice shook as she told me about her brother, Ethan. He'd been arrested the year before for breaking into a pharmacy. The cops found him in the driver's seat with stolen pills in the back. Brandon had been with him that night. And just like me, Brandon walked free while Ethan got 18 months. Ethan told me Brandon went inside alone, Hannah said. He told my brother to wait in the car. Next thing he knew, alarms were blaring and Brandon was screaming at him to drive. But when the cops pulled them over, Brandon said Ethan planned the whole thing. My brother had a shoplifting charge from when he was 14. They believed Brandon. As she spoke, I felt sick. It was the same setup. Vulnerable friend. Staged evidence. Brandon clean as a whistle. And Ethan wasn't the only one. I started digging into Brandon's past like my life depended on it, because at that point, it did. I messaged old classmates, co-workers, even people I barely remembered. The stories started pouring in. There was Tyler, a kid from freshman year who'd been expelled for stealing from the school store. He swore Brandon was with him, egging him on, but when the principal questioned Brandon, he flipped the story and left Tyler holding the bag. There was Danielle, who'd worked with him at a diner. One night, money went missing from the register during her shift. She was fired. Brandon got promoted. Even his ex-girlfriend, Marissa, reached out when she saw the posts about him online. She told me about the time her mom's jewelry went missing, and Brandon convinced her whole family it was Marissa's little brother. A 12-year-old kid grounded for months while Brandon walked away with a diamond bracelet. It was a pattern. A sickness. Brandon didn't just make a mistake once, this was who he was. He built his life by shoving people into pits he dug himself. I started documenting everything. Timelines, statements, screenshots, receipts. Hannah did the same. We compared notes at night like soldiers in a war we hadn't chosen. But the more we gathered, the more Brandon seemed to sense it. Because one night, I found him waiting for me. I walked out of my night shift at the warehouse, dead tired, the parking lot mostly empty. My car was parked under a flickering light. And leaning against it, arms crossed, was Brandon. He looked different. Dark circles under his eyes. Skin pale. Like he hadn't slept in days. But his eyes were alive, sharp, electric with fury. "You're digging too deep," he said quietly. "You don't know what you're playing with." I told him to get out of my way. He smirked. "You think you've got me figured out? You're nothing. Just another name on the list. And you know what happens to people on my list." My phone was recording again. But this time, it didn't calm me. Because the way he said it, so casual, so certain, it didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like a promise. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. I hadn't just stumbled into Brandon's lies. I'd stumbled into his game. And people like me? We weren't supposed to survive his game. After that night in the parking lot, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Brandon leaning against my car, smiling like he already knew how this story ended. I started carrying a baseball bat everywhere. Kept pepper spray in my pocket, double-checked every lock before bed. I even taped over the peephole in my apartment door because I was convinced one night I'd look through and see him staring back. Marcus told me I was spiraling, but then he saw the footage. Brandon outside my work. Brandon threatening me in my own car. Brandon whispering about the list. That's when Marcus stopped telling me to calm down. That's when he told me to stay alive. And then, out of nowhere, Brandon's mom called me. Her voice was shaking. She said Brandon hadn't been sleeping. That he was talking in his dreams, muttering names, laughing in his sleep. She begged me to meet with him, said he just wanted to apologize, said maybe I could help him find closure. Every instinct in me screamed trap. But a smaller voice whispered, what if she's right? What if this is my one chance to end it? So I agreed. But on my terms. I picked a busy diner in downtown Toledo. Cameras, witnesses, daylight. I showed up early, sat in a booth facing the door, phone recording before he even walked in. When Brandon arrived, he looked rough. Gaunt. Twitchy. His hands trembled as he stirred his coffee. For a second, I almost believed he was just broken. Then he started talking. At first, it was almost honest. He told me about his dad leaving when he was 13, about his mom working 3 jobs, about feeling invisible. He said he discovered early he was good at lying, good at twisting stories, good at pointing fingers and walking away clean. He said it became like a game, one he couldn't stop playing. It was never about the money, he muttered, eyes fixed on his cup. It was about control. About watching everyone dance while I pulled the strings. For a second, I almost pitied him. Almost. Then I asked about Hannah's brother, Ethan. His face froze. The mask slipped. That was different, he said quickly. He was already a screw-up. I just gave him a push. When I pressed, he leaned in close, his eyes wild, and whispered. You think you're the first? You think you'll be the last? I've ruined people better than you. Stronger than you. And guess what? Nobody believed them either. I felt my stomach drop. Because I realized this wasn't an apology. This was him bragging. That's when I noticed something else. He kept checking his phone. Glancing at the door. His leg bouncing like he was waiting for a cue. I excused myself to the bathroom, but instead I slipped outside. That's when I saw it, the black sedan parked across the street, engine running, a man in the driver's seat watching the diner like a hawk. My blood ran cold. I texted Marcus one word, trap. Then I walked back inside, heart hammering, sat across from Brandon like nothing was wrong. He smiled when he saw me. Too wide. Too eager. You know, he said, you should have just stayed quiet. Would have been easier for everyone. I forced a laugh. Maybe you're right. I grabbed my jacket, phone still recording, and stood up. He reached for my wrist, but I yanked it away and walked out. My hand shook so bad I almost dropped my keys unlocking my car. As I pulled out, I caught a glimpse of Brandon in the diner window, staring after me. And behind him, through the glass, I saw the man from the sedan step out of the car. Watching me drive away. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I sat by the window with the baseball bat in my lap, waiting for the knock I was sure would come. It didn't. But the next morning, I found my tires slashed. No note this time. Just for flat tires and the sinking realization that Brandon wasn't just trying to scare me anymore. He was trying to corner me. And I knew, deep in my gut, that the next move he made wouldn't just be a warning. It would be the kill shot. The morning after my tires got slashed, I knew Brandon was done playing cat and mouse. He was pushing me toward the edge, waiting for me to slip. But I wasn't the same scared kid he'd framed years ago. I had proof now. I had allies. And I had nothing left to lose. Marcus and I pulled everything together, every recording, every photo, every witness statement from Hannah, Ethan, and the others. He told me we were close to filing a full case, that the DA was interested. All we needed was one more undeniable piece. We didn't have to wait long. 3 nights later, I got home late from work. My apartment was dark, too dark. When I flicked the light switch, nothing happened. The power was cut. And then I heard it, the sound of a window sliding shut. My blood turned to ice. Brandon was inside. I gripped the baseball bat, heart pounding so loud I thought it might give me away. Then his voice drifted out from the shadows, calm, casual, almost amused. "You should have stayed quiet." He stepped into the faint glow from the streetlights leaking through the blinds. He looked wild, eyes bloodshot, smile stretched too thin. And in his hand, glinting under the weak light, was a knife. "This time," he whispered, "you don't get to walk away." Every muscle in my body screamed to run, but I forced myself to stay still. "You're being recorded," I bluffed, holding up my phone like a shield. He laughed. A sharp, ugly sound. "Nobody's gonna save you. Not your lawyer, not your little friends. You're mine." That's when headlights flooded the room. Red and blue lights. Marcus had been parked outside the whole time. He'd insisted on keeping watch after the tire incident. The second Brandon slipped inside, Marcus called it in. The front door burst open. Officers swarmed. Brandon spun, dropping the knife, hands flying up as they shouted commands. For once, he wasn't the one pointing fingers, he was the one cornered. And for the first time, I saw fear on his face. Real fear. They dragged him out in cuffs, kicking and shouting, spitting lies about how I'd invited him, how I was setting him up. But this time, the recordings, the witnesses, the mountain of evidence, we had him dead to rights. The trial that followed was brutal. Every victim came forward. Hannah testified about Ethan. Danielle about the diner. Marissa about her brother. I told my story, voice shaking, but steady. The jury listened. They saw the pattern. They saw the monster behind the mask. When the verdict was read, guilty on all counts, Brandon broke. He begged for mercy, tears streaking down his face, saying he was just a kid who made mistakes. But the judge didn't buy it. 15 years. No parole for at least 7. As they led him away, his eyes locked on mine. He didn't look sorry. He looked furious. Like even in chains, he was planning his next move. I should have felt relief. Triumph. Justice. But all I felt was empty. Because nothing, no sentence, no verdict, would give me back the years I'd lost. Nothing would erase the nights in that cell, the whispers behind my back, the way my mom's eyes searched my face for guilt. Still, when I walked out of that courthouse, Hannah hugged me. Ethan, free on appeal, shook my hand. Marcus smiled, for once without worry. And for the first time in a long time, I realized something: I wasn't alone anymore. Brandon had built his life on destroying others. But in the end, he'd created something he couldn't control. He'd created an army of survivors. And together, we made sure his game was finally over.